Hello, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to today's session. My name is Ice, and I am a program coordinator with Sphere India. And we're gathered here today to discuss some good global and local preparedness practices to combat cyclones. And we're very grateful to have an extremely diverse and as well as an eminent panel with us today. Today's session will focus on seeking reflections on existing preparedness practices, and we will also discuss methods to strengthen the currently existing good practices, and as well as that we'll also be drafting a way forward. So we've been today's session will be moderated by Mr. Anjan Bagh, who is working with Caritas India. He is the thematic manager. Today's session will focus on seeking reflections on existing. My bad, I'm facing some technical difficulties. I apologize for that. Coming back to our session. So our session will be moderated by Mr. Anjan Bagh, who is the thematic manager for humanitarian disaster risk reduction with Caritas India. And along with him, we have some global experts joining us today from the Asia Pacific Regional Office. We also have members from the government of Bangladesh with us today who will be sharing practices on how to prepare for cyclones that are used in Bangladesh. We have experts from UNICEF as well, and we will be getting some regional perspectives from the state of Odisha on the kind of coordination and preparation that takes place to combat cyclones faced in the state of Odisha. Without further ado, I would like to hand it over to Mr. Anjan now to kindly take the session forward.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is Anjan. I hope you can hear me.
Yes, sir. I just request you to kindly speak a little louder, please.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I hope my voice is audible now. Thanks, for introducing me. And I see a number of participants here already. So we can start officially now. This is a very important day for us, and it's thanks Fair India for taking timely actions for preparedness options, which is probably due in the next number of months that's coming ahead, and it's quite informative that we are trying to take actions from now onwards to prepare ourselves. Thanks. And just since this workshops or the event or the discussions that we are doing it now will be centered around cyclone. Of course, the flood and earthquake and other plans so also will be done in the subsequent days. So we'll concentrate much more on cyclone on these workshops, not much more, completely on the cyclone action plan. However, this meeting I know will not be able to completely draw an action plan. However, there are some of the discussions and the guides could come out from these discussions. Just to brief you, and as you know that India, there are 7,000 plus kilometers. The coast is there in India, and out of that 5,000 plus kilometers, which is approximately 76%, plus are highly vulnerable to natural hazards such as cyclones and tsunami. So it's a large coast which is more vulnerable for tsunami and cyclones. There's always a need that the civil society, government, UN, and other organizations, local stakeholders do prepare themselves for the forthcoming hazards that tend to come into these coastal areas. With this, also this particular vulnerability, we know there has been several good practices available within India and also in Bangladesh. To name some of them is the strong early warning system developed in coastal areas. One of the examples is in Odisha. For us, we have got a strong, we have seen the best practices on the implementation of evacuation plan in Odisha and other states also. And there's a strong volunteer base available for evacuations, for immediate support with the local populations, a local quick response team. And we also see that there has been some infrastructural improvement as a best practices, especially we can call them as the cyclone shelters available. So as well as we see that the vulnerabilities still do exist, but there are also the best practices. Today, mostly we'll be discussing both in terms of the vulnerability, capacities, and the best practices available for cyclones. At the same time, this event, today's discourse, will try to develop a guide or a way forward that will help us to have a joint cyclone action plan for India. That is the main agenda of this meeting, outcome of the meeting we are anticipating. However, we know that within this short time, we will not be able to prepare a concrete guides note or guidance note or action plan. However, this is this discourse we can take as a stepping stone where we prepare some guidelines how to go ahead. I know there will be eminent speakers waiting to give us their reflections, their experiences, but at the same time, the second sessions will be much more, we'll be talking at the concrete action plans, what we can do in different 5 subjects that we have developed, or these 5 subjects matter or sectors that will give us a way forward for our action plan. Just for the people, those who are present here, just wanted to give you some way forward that how we are going to look at it. Of course, we take from the first sessions the reflections, the knowledge, and the good practices from Bangladesh and India and the civil societies. Taking forward in the groups, we will try to discuss much more on how do we go forward, what are the things we should take care while preparing an action plan. And we would love this smaller groups that will be divided into the different groups to stay focused and stay available for next 1 month at least, that you can help us to develop a action plan. So the major things that are way forward in next 1 month, we are planning that at least our joint action plan is prepared for India. With this context, thanks everyone for attending. I know some more people will be joining, and we'll be straight away going for the sessions. I think now we have got a small discussion with Mr. Raymond, who is from IFRC SFF Pacific Regional Office, who basically heads the anticipatory actions and for the impact on impact reductions and also the early warning. Mr. Raymond, I hope you are available now.
Yes, hi, and thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to present today. And I see already a few familiar faces, so great to be here. Let me just share my screen. Just a second. Good, I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, thanks.
Yes. Okay, good. I will just talk briefly about forecast-based financing in Asia Pacific, because it is a way of preparing and anticipating disasters, and of course also cyclones. So what is forecast-based financing? The goal of FBS is really to anticipate disasters, to reduce their impact via early actions, and to save lives and livelihoods. It's basically an early warning, early action approach, because we have better forecasts, and we should also use these forecasts to really help vulnerable people. There are 4 components of FBF. I'll just go through that quickly, and then we'll focus a bit more on the early actions, because I understand that for this session, you're more interested in some of the cyclone early actions. But what we basically need for early warning, early action is a trigger. And with forecast-based financing, we really look at impact-based forecasting. That means we can tell when and where the impact of a hazard of a cyclone, for example, is highest, and what kind of early actions should be implemented. The early actions then, they really need to reduce the impact of a hazard. So for example, from a cyclone between a forecast and a hazard occurring. I mean, for cyclones, that is a really challenging activity because the forecast is still quite short. Normally we have around maybe 3 days to 30 hours. And within that very short time, we need to implement early actions. Yeah. Then there is also the financing mechanism that is really crucial so that our Red Cross, Red Crescent national societies are able to implement early actions. We have established a ex-ante fund for pre-agreed early actions. That means that the reliability and the speed of funding is there. So our partners really know, okay, a cyclone is coming. I know which early actions to take, and the financing is also there. They don't have to worry about any of this. Plus, also there is the delivery aspect. It is, of course, very important that our partners are really able to develop to deliver these early actions in that very short time, and for that we need capacity building. Just to highlight that internally within the Red Cross, Red Crescent, we put all of this information into an early action protocol, and that gives them access to 350,000 Swiss francs. I also just want to show you a bit where we work. These are all the countries where we work. That is quite a number, and we don't work alone. We also work together with the UN. You see, for example, I know that a colleague from the CPP is also here in Bangladesh. Yes, we do work with the CPP and BDRCS on Cyclone. But we also work, for example, with the UN and start on floods. So there are a number of partnerships. Where we work on cyclones is actually in Bangladesh and in the Philippines. So I'll show you a bit some examples from the Philippines, because I know that you will talk then again later a bit more on Bangladesh. I wanted to come back to the trigger because it is quite important. It's a requirement for us to understand where to implement early actions, because impact-based forecasting, it's not a weather forecast. It tells us what the weather does. So if we have a forecast of a cyclone approaching, we can tell, okay, it will do this much damage. That's what we basically need to know. And for that to understand, we of course need to have an understanding of the exposure and vulnerability, and all that exposure and vulnerability mapping is done in advance. It is an impact-based forecasting model that is normally developed together with the colleagues from the Red Cross, Red Crescent Climate Center. So we have a forecast that is then overlaid with these different layers that gives us an indication that the dark red parts are then the ones where the impact is highest. And as I said, yes, normally the lead time for cyclones is between 3 days and 30 hours, which is really, really not a lot. So now finally the early actions. What are some of the criteria? They really need to be implemented between a forecast and the hazard occurring. And they really also need to be the right ones, because, for example, if you do early harvesting needs to be done at the right time. It needs to be exactly between that time when you know, okay, now the cyclone is coming. Because if you do it too early, then people or farmers will lose their income for no reason. The same with evacuations. Now, evacuation is like the best example of a useful early action, because you do it right before something happens, right before a flood comes or a cyclone. If you evacuate afterwards, then there's no point anymore. Other early actions that we do is, for example, unconditional cash grants, or we do shelter strengthening kits in the Philippines. These are some early actions that really work. Some other criteria, yes, I mentioned that before, they need to reduce the impact of the hazard. So we need to understand what is the impact of a cyclone on the local community. and then what helps them most to reduce that impact. As I said, needs to be within that lead time. And also the early actions that you do for cyclones, for example, should be something that you normally do not or cannot do as part of the longer term programming or response. It should be really a specific early actions normally. Here is an example actually from Bangladesh. These are evacuations of communities at risk to cyclone shelters. So the Bangladesh Red Crescent helps or supports local communities to come to the cyclone shelter with evacuations via these tractors that you see there. Yeah, that's what I said. So I want to show you one example from the Philippines, which I think is really interesting because it shows that the same typhoon, the same cyclone, can have different early actions because we understand what the impact is at the local level. So for example, we have this cyclone coming. On Samar Island, the early action will be house strengthening because it addresses the house destruction due to the wind. Now the same cyclone goes to the next island and the early action will be different because the impact is different. Because in the Bicol region, we do pre-harvesting or early harvesting because this addresses the farmer's loss of income. It is because we understand what is actually on the ground and how that changes the impact that we can then really identify which early action makes most sense in that local context. But it is the same cyclone. So early actions, do early actions make a difference? I mean, does it help communities? Is that something that makes sense? Yes, quite frankly. We have done a number of statistical impact evaluations to really understand how they support vulnerable communities. And we saw that, yes, they do reduce the impact, or they enable actually vulnerable communities to reduce the impact, but they also reduce the costs of response activities, or they are actually cheaper in comparison to response. Then I will show you some concrete examples. How do early actions make a difference? So, for example, in Bangladesh, we did an impact study for floods. We haven't done that yet for cyclones. That shows that the early action, which was conditional cash, allowed the beneficiaries to have better access to good quality food. 30% were less likely to take up new high interest loans, and also it allowed them to reduce stress and anxiety during and after the flood. So that shows this is in comparison to traditional response that you would do. So there are a number of benefits in Mongolia where we also work, but this is for Zoot. That's a harsh winter condition, similar a bit, I guess, maybe to drought, but in a winter setting, where we provide, or the Mongolian Red Cross provides, cash grants and animal care kits. It helped herders to avoid making destitution sales of valuable assets by up to 43%, again compared to the normal response communities. It also reduces the number of animals with weakened body conditions by up to 7%, and it increases the offspring survival rates of these herds by up to 5%. So these are just some of the findings. We actually are in the process now to do another round of impact evaluations. But overall, also, there is more and more evidence coming now, also from the UN, for example, that yes, of course, early actions make sense, but maybe also in terms of it is a more, I guess, dignified response, in the sense that we, I guess, empower people to take action before something happens, because we know it's coming. Why would we wait? And then people have to go through that hazard and the trauma, and only then we come and help. So that's also one aspect, of course. I want to mention that we have a kind of a repository of early action it started as a database where you put the different early actions there is for typhoons or cyclones that the Red Cross, Red Crescent does, but also the UN. Now it is integrated into an early action database of the anticipation of you can select, for example, by organization, country, hazard, sector, and purpose, and then you see what there is. These are early actions that have been tested and are being implemented at the moment. The Anticipation Hub is a new kind of platform that a lot of partners are already part of. It is really for exchange of knowledge about anticipatory action and everything that comes with it. Also, a repository of trigger will come shortly. We also have these EAP fact sheets, which give you a really quick overview of what early actions we take. That's maybe something I can share afterwards as well. I also wanted to mention, I know a bit conscious of time, that yes, we do work together with a number of partners in Asia Pacific, including with ASEAN, but also with government ministries at the local, national, regional level to advance the anticipatory action agenda. As I said, we work with the UN. We have a joint ECHO project to scale up FBF in ASEAN member states. And we also do joint implementation of early action protocols, as I mentioned before, including, for example, by the UN SURF. Now in Bangladesh, I think that was a big success for floods. And as I said, yes, the Anticipation Hub, it is a platform to share knowledge. If you want to know more, it's really about scaling up. But it can also be, as I mentioned, a database to learn more about hazards, about early actions, about financing, and advocacy. It's, if you want to check it out, anticipationhub.org. And I think I leave it at this for the moment. I hope that was useful, and of course, happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. It was great listening to you. Now I will go back to the participants for a few minutes. If there is any questions or any clarifications or anything you would like to know from Mr. Raymond. So it's open for discussion now.
So for the participants, they have been sending questions to me via chat. And for the benefit of our speakers, I'll be posting the questions received on chat. So we have one question, which is how important is it to perform emergency market mapping before CTP design? We've only received one question thus far.
Raymond, you can start answering that by the time if there's any other discussion or questions comes in.
Okay. Yeah, of course. I mean, that's a good question. Yes, everything would have to be done in advance. So we would do that emergency market mapping before, hoping to understand what actually people can buy with the cash that we hand out. Similarly with, for example, anything that needs to be pre-positioned or anything that needs to be bought within that very short time. Again, thinking of the Philippines or Bangladesh with a few days lead time. Yes, so we have all these, either we have agreements with providers in advance or we have the mapping done. So yes, all of that is done in advance. That is the whole idea that, yeah, this needs to be done in advance so that we don't have to wait too long to get to people, if that makes sense.
Aisha, do we have got any other questions?
No, we do not have any other questions so far.
But I would request Mr. Raymond to stay as long as possible. If there's any cross questions do come, we'll come back to you. But thank you so much for providing us with your input, taking one way forward from early warning to early actions. This is and with an examples and the best practices and from your IFSC experience. That's wonderful to know that the humanitarian community is now moving forward from early warning to early actions. That's great to know. And this has been a very useful input for us, as Mr. Tapan says. It's a very useful input for Indian agencies, organizations, those who are working into and the cyclones and Indian context. Thanks a lot again. And now we go to our second panelist. Mr. Harun is from Bangladesh, government of Bangladesh, who is a founding member of CPP with the government of Bangladesh. He will be talking to us and providing us his reflections of the history framework of CPP and experience on the cyclone preparedness in Bangladesh. Mr. Harun, you are available now?
So far, I know Mr. Harun is facing some technical problems. He yet to join. I just talked with him. I will start. If he can join, he will supplement with me.
Thank you. Just let me introduce you then, because you are the next speaker. So we
hello.
now, since Mr. Harun is facing some technical. Hello. Hello.
May you start?
Am I audible to?
Yes. Are you hearing me?
I believe Mr. Anjan is facing some technical difficulties. So while he's reconnecting, I can introduce you, Mr. Emadul. I'll just get your introduction. Yes. So we have with us Mr. Emadul Haq, who is the director of CPP from the government of Bangladesh. And he will be speaking about the preparedness exercise on cyclones and the methods adopted by the government of Bangladesh. Sir, please, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, India, and other participants from other countries of Asia region. Thank you for very much for inviting me to talk some about a great organization of named Cyclone Preparedness Program. I want to share my screen. Is it visible?
Yes, sir. Perfectly clear. Go ahead, please.
Okay. Thank you. I will be talking about Cyclone Preparedness Program, Ministry of Disaster Management and Relief of Bangladesh. Actually, we will be talking more specifically cyclone preparedness and reducing community risk by the very organization Cyclone Preparedness Program. This is an organization. It is actually joint effort of government of Bangladesh and then Bangladesh Red Crescent Society. This is the Bangladesh at risk of cyclone and storms. As you know, Bangladesh has an open Bay of Bengal face in the southern part of the country. Our disasters, more specifically, cyclone and storm surge horizon comprises of 40 million people, 728 kilometer long coast, very small comparing to India. India, I just heard around 5,000 kilometer long coast you have. But as a small country, but our whole southern part is actually is under cyclonic and storm surge exposure. That is our cyclone risk. The background of CPP, actually CPP is initiated based on a very esteemed actually event, horrifying event of 1970 cyclone. That is one of the most catastrophic disaster in history, which caused around more than actually 1 billion people. This is introduction due to this cyclone. CPP is the first foot step of disaster management in this land. After the 1970 cyclone, it was actually initiation of then League of Red Cross Now it is called as IFRC. Their effort. In 1973, Bangladesh government took the program as government initiation, which was formally approved by our great father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. From that time, it is known as joint effort of Bangladesh government and Bangladesh Red Crescent Society. But at present, Bangladesh government is totally taken every responsibility of this program, and it is totally funded by government exchequer under the Ministry of Disaster Management and Relief. We do basically 5 basic works. We are guided by Standing Order on Disaster. We call it SOD in Bangladesh, very well documented for preparedness and response. We do 5 basic works, that is dissemination of early warning message. We don't generate early warning, that is generated by Met Office. We support people in evacuation. We do search and rescue. We provide first aid and primary health care to the injured people. We also assist the local authority in emergency humanitarian assistance just in the time of disaster. And we do some participatory community capacity building activities we will detail in later. CPP management it is now a government institution. It is just guided by umbrella under the umbrella of Ministry of Disaster Management and Relief. 2 bodies are there: policy committee headed by our minister, and the implementation board headed by Secretary, Ministry of Disaster Management and Relief. And our guiding document is the guiding law or guiding regulation is Standing Order on Disasters. This is the CPP command area. Actually, we are covering almost all the coastal region of Bangladesh. We are headed by Ministry of Disaster Management and Relief, that is government, and 2 bodies. And we have a lateral relation with Bangladesh Red Crescent Society. One director from Red Crescent is with us in the CPP headquarters. Under our headquarters, we have 7 zones and 41 sub-districts covering 355 unions. This is the last local government set up in our country. And under this we have 3,700 volunteer units. They are our main strength, working with the community, vulnerable people, and they have relation with local government, disaster management committees, social leaders, etc. This is our telecommunication network, how we disseminate early warning in the time of disaster. Our operational and early warning structure, I have said earlier, national headquarters to zone to sub-district to union team leaders. Actually, from the unions, we are totally operated by volunteers. Up to sub-district, we have government officials. Under that, the whole operation is done by the volunteers. Our early warning dissemination, I've said we disseminate early warning generated by our Bangladesh Meteorological Department. Our cyclonic signal is in the 10 scale of 10. We do this dissemination by some visible and audible. We will share the detail later. Our early warning accessibility ensured by visibility, I have said just by hoisting flags, flares, solar light poles, etc. We make it audible by loudspeaker, megaphone, siren, community radio, and we make it readable by newspapers, quick posters, leaflet, etc. We have to make it understandable by customized with local language, and we also use some communication with community tools. We define localized danger. We do we use some template SMS to make the early warning more localized. Volunteers, actually, they are the heart of CPP. If you call CPP as a good practice, but these volunteers made it best practice in the world. We are good due to the system, but if you consider us best, the volunteers actually making it. We have 19 districts, 41 sub-districts, 355 million. I just said we have 74,000 volunteers, male and female, equally participated. The last unit working with the community and vulnerable people is our unit committee. They are each of the unit are comprised by 20 members. They are divided by our 5 core works. I've said warning, early warning, dissemination, sheltering, rescue, first aid, and relief group. They are equally divided by each of the subgroup by 4 members. And their terms of duties are operated by this actually working group. Our terms of CPB volunteers, this is very important. We are proud that our dropout rate is very insignificant because we do a very good selection process. Though they are all our volunteers, they are non-paid. No incentive, direct incentive, they are not getting. But due to the recruiting process, it is very important. They have to be permanent in locality so they can know the local danger. They know the geography of this area. They have to have commitment. Commitment is the most important one, volunteers. Own accord. We are mostly emphasized on this. A beggar cannot be volunteers. Beggar set cannot be lower. Beggar, volunteer set will always be in the upper set. And some other criteria we have. Our volunteer principles, they always has to be on toes. They are first in response. They have to know the danger. They have to be prepared by training and practices. Personal safety has to be we ensure. They have the humanity and safety of life first. These are their principles. The volunteers' theory of success, we can call it commitment and dedication and the time of recruitment, and their way of work is full of commitment and dedication. We make them prepared by training and practice, and knowledge and experience is very important thing, and that are making difference actually in response experience. Thus, they do the disaster risk reduction of millions. Our volunteers' early action momentum towards the community. In the time of disaster, people are going to shelters or going to safe places. But our volunteers come out when the disaster or signal is declared. In 1 to 3 signal, they step down from home. In signal 4, that is, we call it triggering. In this way, they walk towards the community. And 5 to 7, they run. And 5 to 7 actually danger period. And 8 to 10 signal is great danger. In that period, they just sprint. No way to move slow. We have a very good volunteer database, which is online through National Data Center. And we have sufficient mobile and web application with this for connectivity up to root level. Our core activities, I have said earlier, signal dissemination in the signaling stage, they do differently. Signal 4, I have said earlier, 5 to 7, 8 to 10. Then evacuation, they support people in taking shelter. They provide special support to the disabled, elderly people, pregnant, child and women. And for others, they do the awareness to come to shelters, and they guide the people to take shelters and safe places. They do search and rescue. They have ample training to do the search and rescue in the time of disaster. They support first aid, I have said earlier, they have training for this. In normal period, we have some awareness activities like volunteers contacts, drill and demonstration. We do it very regularly. In every union, we do it every year. Film, video show, publicity campaign, poster, booklet, etc. Staging of the drama, etc. Our newer inclusion is cultural intervention that reaching the community more effectively. Our this cultural team creating a deer awareness in coastal and riverine area, focusing on understanding disaster, know the risk, and must know the do and don'ts in the time of disaster. CPP's new inclusion in the last year, that is women empowerment and CPP. This is our disaster management new signature, CPP, women empowerment and CPP. We, in our volunteer structure, women were simply 1/3 comparing to the male in number. And they had some qualitative and leadership backwardness also. We are going to overcome this backwardness. Now we are considering our women volunteers as agent of change. They are doing more duty in the time of disaster and demonstration and other showcases. Strength on our volunteer, strength of CPP. CPP's main strength is their trained volunteer. I have said they are making our program the best. Highest level of commitment and sincerity of volunteers, trust and reliability of volunteers. This is very important. People in the village, people in the coastline trust most on the volunteers. Coordination, goodwill and practice. We have 50 years experience and goodwill. Knowledge about the community and geographical location. And most important thing is participation and support from the community. Our achievement, we are recognized as model in participatory and inclusive disaster. We are flag bearer of disaster volunteerism, real volunteerism. We are actually showing no incentive, no financial support, no other direct or indirect support they are doing, just volunteering. Why do they are doing this? Just for the recognition. They bear the government emblem in the left side. They bear the great Red Cross emblem in the right side. This is their actually motivation. And they are the disaster leaders. In the time of crisis, a simple man become a leader. That is the motivation. We have said one of the background catalyst of our prime ministers earning the champion of the earth. And another great actually appreciation by Indian Prime Minister, His Excellency Narendra Modi ji, lauded CPP as global best practice in the AMCDRR. Disaster response increased due to the credibility. I have said earlier, women participation, significant reduction of loss and damage. This is very significant. In 1970, we lost 1 million, that is 7 digits. Now we are in single digit. Enhancing SDG achievement, and we are marching towards the community resilience. CPP, though CPP is named as Cyclone Preparedness Program, but now we are not stick in this single disaster. We are going to multi-hazard response. We are going beyond cyclone, more involvement in community-based activities. We have already established 5,000 member rapid response team to response in urban disaster or any man-made hazards in the time. And we are establishing water rescue team. They are highly trained and professionally trained to rescue people from drowning or other hazard in the water. Community-based security system. This is very important. Community-based security system for left out properties of sheltered people. You know, people do not want to go to shelter due to the left out security of or fear of theft of their left out properties. We are doing yard meetings by our women volunteers. We have already talked about the database. We are very newer thing. We are already involved. Introduced monitoring embankments and dams and reporting arrangement by all volunteers. We have already introduced our school program to develop disaster ready generation. And finally, we can say we are empowering women. Our signature flag is CPP, and we are the CPP. The very CPP is leading to women empowerment in whole DRR. Thank you very much. I am stopping here. Will be available next till the end.
Thank you, Amidul sir, for sharing with a great experience. And I think this has been a wonderful to learn from Bangladesh. And especially I'd like to really thank you on your presentation, especially focusing on the governance structures that is being followed in the CPP programs, and also the sustainable structures which helps the community, and also recognizing the community, the volunteers, telling them they are the heart of CPP programs, and also the women forces. So these are the I hope I believe this makes it is the best practices of the best program practices, I believe. Other than this, we have a few questions to you, sir. I think I can take it from one. Dr. Hena is looking forward to learn from you on the volunteers. Is there any paid workers? I know you shared something that's volunteers, but is there any dedicated paid workers into the programs, or to which level the paid workers there? And then she also would like to know the lesson learned and experience with the your experience with the female volunteers that you shared. And there's another doctor. Initially, these two questions, and then we can come back to the rest.
Sorry, I have to take a phone. Would you please repeat the first question?
First question is about the, do we have the dedicated paid workers on these programs?
Dedicated paid workers?
Yeah. And then second question is, can you share your lessons or the experiences on the female volunteers?
Yes, thank you. Our all volunteers are totally real volunteers. They are not paid, and no promise of any payment by any kind, and nothing. Actually, this is, we cannot, sometimes we are in a position, cannot define why they are working in the time of disaster, when people are taking shelters, they are going towards the danger without any payment or without any direct recognition. This is actually spiritual thing, we can only say. The CPP is bearing this moral values from since 1972. This is actually inherited by our volunteers, and we still have some volunteers who were employed in 1972. They are still working, and they are the living legend, and they are actually doing examples, showing example for the new volunteers. And the lesson about the women experience, it is amazing. We just CPP, we just initiated a small change initiative in 2019 to make the early warning more accessible and to reduce some gender-based violence for women and girls in the time of disaster. But then we felt we are just 1/3 in the total strength, but huge women are ready to join the CPP as volunteers. And we just took our government approval. We just make it double in few months. All the women's now the main actually important thing we get, we have very strong younger force as women agent of change. We are saying this. The women are encouraged, and our another significant thing we got, our Honorable Prime Minister personally inaugurate the women incorporation of CPP last year 13 October in International Day of Disaster Reduction.
Thank you, sir, for providing your time. And another question is there. Does CPP engage CSO, CBOs, and other public and academic partners or as a collaborators, and how it is being done?
Yes. We are always interacting with CSOs, NGOs, INGOs, and in the very activity about women empowerment and women training. We are engaged with the UNFPA and some local NGO or INGO like Action Aid, and we have regular relation with UN organization, IFRC, American Red Cross, and some other partner organization of Bangladesh Red Cross Society. And we are doing in combined effort in the Rohingya camps, more than 1 million people, Rohingya refugees are in Bangladesh. CPP is totally getting responsibility of disaster risk reduction of the refugee people in the camps. That effort is totally by collaboration with INGO, UN organization.
Thank you. অনেক ধন্যবাদ স্যার আপনার শেয়ারিং এর জন্য, and this has been a great learning for us. Yeah, yes, Tapanda.
Yeah, if allowed, may I ask a few things?
Sure, Tapanda, sure.
Thank you, Mr. Hawk. This is Tapan from ECHO. I really thank you for your availability with short notice and wonderful presentations. I know CPP has been the pioneer of this any community level participation. You have taught the world. India has learned a lot over the years, and I have personally seen CPP activities. You are talking in Cox's Bazar and other areas, how they become proactively they are doing it. I also have seen this what Dr. Hina was asking, the recognitions, incentives. It's the social recognitions which is the incentive, and most of these volunteers later on become the leaders and participate in the election process. And to be a good leader, this IMA CPP volunteer, IMA Red Cross volunteers, that makes another eligibility. So that's a wonderful things what I have seen it. But I wanted to check that you have the DMCs in one side, you have the CPP in another side, that is two parallel organizations. Though in your presentation you mentioned they interact, but there are some overlaps also there. How do you manage these overlaps? Because this DMC is also responsible for evacuation, early warning, dissemination. CPP does the same, and they get the early relief.
Yes, thank you. Actually, there is no scope of overlapping. Actually, in standing order on disasters, the DMC or disaster management committees in every layer, their duties are clearly defined, and CPP actually response organization. We are not doing much. We just in action in the just pre-disaster and disaster period. And our volunteers are totally a supporting force of DMCs. We always support DMCs. DMC to take the responsibility of evacuation. So our volunteers are under the local government. DMCs are government or local government institution, you know very well. So they goes directly under the DMCs. There is no actually overlapping. So far we have experiencing our standing order on disaster is incorporated since 1997. So far we did not face actually much problem with them, because volunteers, everybody trust and rely on volunteers because they have no vested interest, they have no other intentions. So working with volunteers or working by volunteers is very easy experience so far we got. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yes, I saw that because the DMC, CPP volunteer is a part of the DMC institution and structures. So that's there. Thank you very much. Thanks. Over to Anjan.
Thank you, sir. I think we do not have any further queries. Thank you, Mr. Hawk, for this, and I hope Mr. Harun is there already. Mr. Harun.
No, Anjan, it seems that he's facing some technical issues, so I think we may proceed to our next speaker until Mr. Harun is able to join us.
Thank you. Right, and now we go forward with Mr. Sarabjit. Mr. Sarabjit is a disaster risk reduction specialist in UNICEF, and his well wishes. He's been always supporting us, and he'll be now talking on integrating cyclone preparedness with the government policies. Sarabjit, are you there?
Yes, very much. Am I audible?
Yes, Sarabjit, perfectly.
Okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Anjan. I won't be using any PPT, but I'll speak straight from my head. I think it's important to recognize that I should speak both about policy and what action has been taken based on the policy. I think I'll try to bridge that gap. Mostly when we talk about policies, we forget about the action part. So the overarching policy which really drives preparedness in the country is the Disaster Management Act of 2005, which led to establishment of various institutions, right from national to state to district level. And most importantly, I think the biggest success of the Disaster Management Act was how it empowered the local administration to take early action for preparedness, for response, recovery, etc. So district magistrates are completely empowered to take action, use the provisions of Disaster Management Act. And based on this act, we not only institutions were established, and the national, state, and district level disaster management plans were prepared and are being regularly updated. So these are important policy uh, outputs from the Disaster Management Act. In 2009, way back in 2009, we got the first disaster management policy as well for the country. And based on some of these important provisions of the Disaster Management Act, disaster response funding norms were established, disaster response funds were established right from state level to the national level. So currently we have very clear norms which really help the state and the district authorities to take action, informed action, and they know what kind of funds they can utilize for example, for search and rescue, for establishing camps, or reinforcing certain embankments, or whatever need be. So all the norms are clearly laid out in the SDRF and the NDRF norms. Another significant development which came out of these policies was the establishment of the National Disaster Response Force and the state disaster response forces in various states, which has really galvanized the search and rescue actions. So there are large number of professionally trained and properly equipped disaster responders, first responders, and they're mostly for search and rescue. And they have not only done search and rescue in India, but also in other countries. For example, after the Fukushima disaster in Japan, or after the Nepal earthquake in Nepal. So it continues. Corresponding to the national policies, there are state policies, and particularly in the states of West Bengal, Orissa, Andhra Pradesh, which are more cyclone prone, there are clear disaster management plans. There are mechanisms such as natural calamity committees at state and district level. So the policies have also led to projects. So one of the projects which has been often talked about is the National Cyclone Risk Mitigation Project, which funded by the World Bank and managed by NDMA, which has led to a number of significant improvements in the number of cyclone shelters, underground electrical connections in the coastal districts, coastal embankments being strengthened, or strengthening of the roads in the coastal areas. So that's very, these are some of the important disaster management side of policies. Corresponding to this, we had environment side of policies as well, which actually they preceded the Disaster Management Act. The coastal regulation zones came way back in the late 1990s, in the middle of the 1990s rather, and the norms were later established for how do you really manage the coastal assets, the land, the water, the edge of the fragile ecosystems, and so on and so forth. So that has also helped the strengthen the policy environment to take risk and resilience actions. Cyclone risk mitigation has led to establishment of number of cyclone shelters, and what happens inside the cyclone shelters. I think that's an important policy decision which has happened in multiple states, and that there are committees to manage the cyclone shelters. There are funds available each and every cyclone shelter committee to take actions, and then also conduct simulations, periodic simulations, etc. I think I'll close my inputs by saying that now we're seeing after more than a couple of decades of work, we're seeing that sectors have started taking informed action and policy level action for emergency preparedness. For example, if I may say, before the Fani cyclone, some of the early action taken by the Anganwadi centers. Anganwadi Center, just for the benefit of colleagues joining from other countries, are the institutions at local level which are responsible for early childhood development and early childhood care. Take-home rations, which is a normal sort of entitlement from these institutions, were distributed well in advance for a number of weeks in anticipation of the Fani cyclone in Orissa, which helped number of families, particularly poor families, to have access to nutritional food supplements. So despite, of course, there was an anticipation that Anganwadi centers would get disrupted due to cyclone. Of course, some of them got disrupted, and this kind of early action or preemptive action really helped. So policies now are getting translated into various actions across the country. Of course, there are gaps, which I won't. I think next time when I get a chance to, I think I've done with my time. So over to you, Anjan.
Thank you, Sarabjit, for really giving us snapshots on our policies, available policies, and the enabling environment that is available in India, and the policy structures, and also policies into actions at the local level. So I'll get back to the participants if the participants have got few queries for you to clarify.
Anjan, we don't have any questions as of now. As soon as we receive them, I'll post them on the chat box, or I request participants to please send in their questions on the chat box since I have not received any yet.
Yeah, thanks, Ais, for this. Thanks, Sarabjit. Again, as soon as we get any queries, and we'll get back to you because you'll be available with us, we know. And thanks for your presence, which makes a difference for us, at least and for us to take the discussions forward. Thank you, all the panelists, for your presentations and giving us your valuable time and knowledge that you transfer to us, which takes us to the next sessions, where we will be discussing mainly on the process to strengthen existing preparedness and the tools and guidelines that we have. For this, we'll be going for a breakaway sessions. Before we go to breakaway sessions, I would like to inform the entire group. We'll be dividing you into 5 groups. In the 5 groups, we'll be discussions. The group 1 will be discussions on the tools, guidelines for assessments for cyclones. Group 2 will be discussing for the need for enhancing existing capacities on cyclone preparedness. Group 3 will be discussing on the preparedness efforts for mobilizing resources. Group 4 will be discussing on the preparedness interventions in strengthening early warning systems. And 5 will be discussing on intervention integrations in existing policies and framework. So all these 5 the topics that we have put it for you to discuss is well thought, and this was designed, discussed and designed to keep us ourselves for these workshops also, and also for the future action plan. As I shared with you earlier, that our intention is not to end these discussions within these workshops, but to come out with with a joint action plan for the cyclone and cyclone preparedness for the civil society, government, and UN and other stakeholders. So your discussions will be help us today at least to prepare our guideline or guidance note for us to take the discussions much forward. So you'll be total time for us for your discussions is 45 minutes. As soon as you go into the group, you will be led by a moderator and a reporter there who will be introducing you there. And then the summarization from all groups will be done as soon as we join back together around 3:50, 3:55. So I think we can go back to the groups now. And
yes, thank you, Anjan. I would just request Siljo to give some basic and general instructions to our participants as to how to navigate the breakaway sessions. Siljo, can you please guide our participants?
Yes. We, as described by Mr. Anjan, we are having 5 breakout rooms now, and I have manually assigned each one of you the breakout rooms, and we would be having one moderator, rapporteur, and various experts from various fields. And just as I open the breakout room, you would be getting a pop-up on your screens. If you click OK to it, you would be moving out to your respective breakout rooms. And further to it, after the given time is over, when we end the meeting, you would be automatically called out to the main room. So I'm opening the breakout room right now.
कराना तो बच्चे करेंगे करके
Iris, are you back there?
Yes, our group is back. I think we are missing maybe one group, or no, by now everybody would have joined us here in the main room.
Okay. So is the right time that we go back to the main, start back?
Yes, yes, absolutely. Now we can move to the summarizing session, wherein the moderator from each group can come and present the discussion and present whatever was discussed in their room, and kindly do this summary in about 3 to 4 minutes, no longer than that, so that we can just move towards the final, the way forward session. So it would be good to hear from each group what was discussed. I would request group number 1 to begin. Divya, if you are here, could you kindly begin on preparatory tools and guidelines for assessments for Cyclone? Thanks, Dhananjay. We can see your screen.
You'll have to allow Divya to unmute herself.
Yes, just did that. Divya, you're co-host now. You can unmute yourself and continue.
Yeah, thank you, Ice. Thank you so much. So we were 9 people there in our group. So thanks to everyone for providing such a valuable inputs in our group. So what we discussed, like the first pointer was shared by my colleague, like whenever we are going for any assessment, it should not be non-negotiable. Like when we are talking about any sector, wash, food, nutrition, anything, then our standard should be non-negotiable. As per those non-negotiable standard, we should design our tool and go for the assessment. And when we are going for assessment, our tool should be friendly to collect the data from all the levels. It should be from the household level, it should be from the village level, it should be from the camp level. And if there is a larger area, we can also think about the block level or the district level data to collect. And before going for the assessment, we should also we should be very handy with all the tools with us, assessment formats, and the technology which we would like to use there. And we should also understand the scale of that particular disaster. If scale is high, our assessment strategy should be as per that, and if scale is low, our assessment strategy should be decided as per that. And for assessment, we should have dedicated team in the field, and if possible, we should also do some capacity building of local volunteers and local stakeholders prior the disaster, so they will be ready to support during the assessment. And we should have that dedicated team in the field who can go physically in the field and collect the data. And there should be some people, those who can go and meet the government officers and line departments to collect the information from their level. And our sectors experts should be predefined. Like these guys or these organizations, all organization and all individuals are having some expertise in them. Like Save the Children is good in education, and UNICEF is good in child protection, Oxfam is good in a wash. So as per individual and organization, we should define some team which can be support as a data collector, as a report writer, as a analyzing the data and information. So it will be more helpful for us because they have their prior experience in that particular sector. And this point I already shared, we should try to train more and more volunteers. So if any disaster happens, we can use the particular volunteers for the need assessment in that particular area. And our SOPs should be defined, and there should be a mapping of stakeholders. Like we should collect the data from the variety of stakeholders, like community, within the community also, as per special people are there, special need people are there, special age people are there, like children, women, men, there are some people, those who are living with the special needs. So we can categorize our stakeholders as per that, and we should also map stakeholder from the our grassroots functionaries, those who are directly involved with the community during the service providing in the peacetime also. So they have all the data, all the information. So mapping of our stakeholders is also important, and increase the teams assessment team and strengthen their capacity as per the requirement. And we can also pay attention on the specially able people, aged people, pregnant and lactating mothers are there, and there are many socially backward group, those who always left out in all the assessment. So we need to pay attention on them also. Please take the second slide. And we should also establish some system of community feedback mechanism, where community can come up and share about their grievances. If there is any gap, is there any problem, they can also come up with the proper feedback. And that feedback mechanism system can be established as per the scenario. It can be online, it can be offline also, depends of that particular situation. And beyond assessment also, we should be ready before the disaster with the ready-made formats, standard formats, so we can immediately go in the field and collect the data. And we should also understand the difference between the high risk area and the low risk area. Like some areas are required some particular sectoral attention, and some areas require some other kind of attention. So we need to identify their risk, identify their need as per their particular situation. One of my colleague also came up with the like we can target school, colleges and other institutions to do some mock drills during the peacetime. So at least these particular group, they will be aware about the situation, they will learn about the situation, and decision makers like government and humanitarian agency, they will be come up whether our community is prepared for any disaster or they are not. What is the level of our preparedness? So as per that, they can also make some action on that. And we should also understand the key informant, those who can provide the right information from the community. And there are always people, those who left out. So we should not, we should focus that they should not left out during our assessment process. And assessment of camps is also equally required, because that time mostly people are living in the camp. So we should also focus not just the people, those who are living in their houses, respective houses, but also people, those who are living in the camps. And people, those who are living in camps, their needs can be completely different from people, those who are living in their houses. And many times what happened within the team also, those who are having a long experience working in humanitarian sector, many people come up with their own pre-assumptions. No, in cyclone situation, no, this kind of situation happened. In flood situation, this kind of impact happened. So we should not entertain much of our pre-assumptions. We should understand the more real-time situation of community. As per that only we should come up with the data and information in the report. And preparedness for collection tool is also required, right? Like recently, we also trained many volunteers on Kobo Collect tool. Such tools can save the time. Such tools can help entire team to come up with directly with the data that can be done. Next. So we should also understand like particular department, particular area, line department, they are really prepared in that sense or not. If they are not, we can also help them to come up with the proper information. And role of PRI is equally important. So they already have the ready-made information regarding their area. So we can collect such information from PRI members, because they are service providers. So they always update their information regarding the people, those who are living there. And we should also understand the protocols of assessment. Before entering in any area, we should take the proper permission from government. That permission may be the verbal consent, or maybe just information which we are sharing with government, but they should be aware that such particular group or such particular group of people, they are in the area and they are working on the assessment. And we should also support government to share the whatever report is coming, whatever data is coming, to share with them so they can also fill the gap. And if we are finding that such gaps are still not addressed, we can advocate such issues in front of government and in front of other humanitarian agencies. And we can also leverage IAG groups and our existing group, those who are there managing the coordination platform in the area, district level IAGs, state level IAGs. They already have relationship with their government, so we can take their support in the taking permission and providing the reports and sharing the information with the government. And we need to map the stakeholders who can be the right person to who can provide us the proper information. So this is from our side. Thank you so much. And I request my other team members, if I miss any point, please come up and share.
Thank you very much, Divya. I see that I see that Simanjal has been sharing and I have been noting down those points as well, which I will be including in the summary. So I thank you for sharing your discussions that took place. I would now like to invite Rubal to share from Group 2, where you discussed the need for enhancing existing capacities on cyclone preparedness. Rubal, over to you, please.
Sure, guys. Thank you so much. So we had a very engaging and participatory discussion on this topic as Group 2. We discussed the need for enhancing existing capacities on cyclone preparedness. I will be brief with the summary of points. The discussions that were entailed were as follows. The early warning must reach N-mile connectivity, and we must have community-based system, which is currently missing, and also it needs strengthening. The existing infrastructure can be arranged for relocation sites during emergencies, and it would contribute to the preparedness and the evacuation plans if it is already in place. Medical teams to be trained for cyclones for common disease prevention such as malaria, dengue, etc., with relief capacity and equipment already in place. We can have mechanisms to prevent overlapping of actions and duplication of efforts. For the block or district level, appropriate record keeping processes may be put in place. As for evacuation and shelter management, we require clear SOPs and holistic community-based SOPs. SOPs need alignment with the local NGOs and at the panchayat level. Preparedness plans at block or panchayat level need to be developed in order to communicate the correct information to the most vulnerable coastal areas. And for this, the DDMAs must be engaged in the process. Capacity building of local task force team is a necessity. For the village and block level, we may develop demographic profiles with the most at-risk groups charted out in the families present. And this may be planned for initial evacuation. For example, pregnant women, children, old age people, they need to be evacuated first. So this kind of database may be prepared during peace times, and it would immensely benefit the response and relief processes during disasters. Primary needs in the disaster risk reduction team. So support systems may be developed with appropriate representation from all population groups, especially the minority groups, women, old age groups, persons with disabilities, etc. Include landlocked areas and areas in proximity to coastal areas in preparedness plans, because they also have they also face the aftermath of the disasters, and we need to strengthen the institutionalized district disaster management authorities in response and recovery processes. Early warnings should reach these areas according to the disaster risk or intensity, which is expected to entail. Mapping of contingency plans in URS platforms needs to be done. And we also can strengthen the tools present, for example, the Kobo Collect tool, GRNA tool, URS matrix, coordination and collaboration tools. We must focus on program management at every step of the disaster. To develop capacity on EMA, CTB programming, meal tool, build advanced capacity for efficient capacity building of relief and response teams. Panchayat level emergency preparedness plans, building capacity of local volunteers on education in emergency will be beneficial to ensure educational continuity. I would like to request my team members in the breakout room, in the break room session, if I missed out on any points, please add them. Um,
Thank you, Rubal. Thanks a lot.
Over to you, Ice. Thanks.
Thank you. All our participants are requested that if any of the speakers have missed out any point, feel free to put them in the chat box because I will be taking note of the points there. So thanks a lot, Rubal. Let's move on to group 3. I would now like to invite Anjan to share the reflections and discussion on the preparedness efforts for mobilizing resources. Anjan, over to you.
Mithila, are you there? Mithila? Hello? Mithila, I think the notes are with her.
Yes, I've just, Mithila's been made co-host, so she can share her screen now.
Mithila. Please do share. I'll add on.
Mithila, do you want to run us through the points? Because Anjan has just said that you can start and he will add if anything is missed out.
Yeah, sure. So I'll just run through the points. So the points for emergency preparedness that were brought forward were, first of all, taking care of basic needs of the people, such as food, water, clothing, and shelter. Then precautions should be there right from the pre-disaster phase for living as well as non-living things. That includes property, household, etc. And so also we do have a lot of supplies that are already present. So proper management of these supplies before the disaster is important, and pre-positioning of these supplies state-wise is important. Then management of in-kind resources within the country so as to have a proper system for their quality check and also for their last mile distribution is an important point. Then human resource is also very important along with financial resources. So volunteers should be always trained and be ready and prepared for any disaster that comes up. And also adequate resources are available at community level, but the management of these resources is missing. So an effort needs to be given to manage the resources that are already available at community level. Then the gaps that we found in during this are that the resources are distributed very unequally within the country and also within any area, and also there is a lack of focal point from where we'll get information about the resources. So there should be a centralized database for information and a focal point from where the information can be obtained. After that, the marginalized population should always be considered, as well as the vulnerable groups such as children and elderly, and their needs should be taken into consideration for calculating the resources required. Then in the development program, we generally forget the humanitarian action. So risk information and humanitarian actions are a big point to be considered in development programs. Also, the most important point that came up was building pool funds at national level as well as local level, because most of the funds that are available are granted on loan basis that need to be repaid. So a pool of funds is required for preparedness. Then the resources should be responded and coordinated well at all the levels. So as to have their proper organization. then there should be an effort to bring collaboration between government as well as NGOs so as to avoid duplication of work and resources. And communication at all the level is very important to give information about the resources as well as information about the loss of life and property and what kind of support is required. And then the points to turn these gaps into opportunity. So the points for that are bringing a proper mechanism to fill in the gaps. So most of the gaps are opportunities in themselves, but we need a proper mechanism to convert them into an opportunity. The notion of accountability groups sector-wise who lead during different disaster could help in preparedness and response. And information dissemination through WhatsApp groups, video conferences, etc., can disseminate information at a fast pace. And there should be a good rapport between NGO and government for streamlining resource mobilization and standardizing a volunteer network and their preparedness. Also, there should be an online database for all of the volunteers that are present in a particular area so that it is easy to find out which volunteer or organization has a particular capacity. Also, the census data should be easily available so as for the authorities to know where a particular household is located and if they are in the vulnerability section or if they need any kind of help. Then a pool fund from national to local level is very important, and leveraging community-based preparedness, local capacity is important, and inspiring faith-based groups to collaborate with NGOs in emergency preparedness and response could be an important agenda for preparedness. Then building the capacity at local government is very important, and the local governments should take the responsibility since it lies with the local government to take immediate response. Their capacity is important, and the suggestions and outcomes that could be taken further are so all organizations should give a certain percentage of their resource to preparedness to strengthen the preparedness in the country. Also, revival of community-based programs. So the community-based programs, once if they are started, should be properly monitored for a long term so as they don't fade off. Then capacity building and training of local groups for rescue is important, and national to local level pool funding is already discussed. Then mapping and formation of database of volunteers so as to have the most up-to-date information about volunteers, as well as mapping and database formation of vulnerable groups, and accessibility of resources for the vulnerable groups is very important so as the organizations as well as the authorities have an information of who the vulnerable groups are, where are they located, their needs, and the mode of contacting them to gather more information is required. So these are some of the points that we discussed in group number 3. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Mithila. And again, I request all members from group 3 to add to the chat box if they'd like any other discussion point to be added here. I would now like to call Shivani from group 4 to present the discussion on the preparedness interventions in strengthening the early warning system. Shivani, over to you, please. I see Shivani is now co-host. Shivani, you can unmute yourself and start speaking.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ais. So I'll be briefly summarizing the points which were discussed in the group 4, that is preparedness interventions in strengthening the early warning system for cyclone in India. So the points that were discussed are, first thing that we've seen for many past cyclones, for that matter, the recent cyclones Burevi and Nivar, IMD has given us 99% accurate warnings. And talking about the technical part, the forecast has been very accurate, and the systems are quite strong if you look at the technical aspect of the early warning system. So it was also discussed that how these warnings are further linked with the states and district, and how regular monitoring is done by the states, the districts, and also at panchayat level. But however, it was discussed that multi-purpose cyclone shelter has to be strengthened. The next point that was discussed was the state and district operating centers, they can send alerts on the mobile. So whenever there is an alert, SMS can go to the alerted area. And it was also discussed that if taking into consideration the literacy issue, the SMS can also be in the form of a voice message, or the message can be announced, publicly. The next point that was discussed is the coordination mechanism from it should come from incident commander to avoid the chaos. Because if any organization or if any individual is giving the early warning to the community or people, then it will really create a chaos, and we should be dependent on the reliable source. The next point that was discussed is that how NGOs should support the efforts of the government, the NDRF team, and their efforts. We should also give training to the PRI, or suppose, for example, if a new employee or a new person has joined the PRI, or the people who are working for disaster mitigation and early warning. So they have to be properly giving training so that the system is maintained, and to avoid the gaps in it. It was also discussed that how we should engage the community in this, and how because they play a very important role, and how we can how we can prepare them by being involved with them, and giving timely trainings and timely guidings, and how the local NGOs can play a major part in that, how we can partner with local NGOs for better disaster mitigation and function for smooth implementation of processes. It was also discussed that, for example, during COVID, there were many myths regarding the pandemic. So it was also discussed that for early warning system, if there happens, individual happens to spread a rumor, so how that can be rectified. That we have to be reliable on IMD, on newspaper, on our state authorities and the district authorities, and then only we should take a decision. I would end, and I would like to ask Mahendraji, Tambiji, Poojaji, and others from the group to add more point to this. Thank you.
Shivani, am I audible?
Thanks a lot, Shivani. Yes, Shivani.
Yes, Shivangi.
Yeah, thank you. There were two more points that first, to prepare the community, we can educate, like adding the preparedness and the warning system in the school curriculum can help a lot, because children will be expecting to teach that in their family, or vice versa. Secondly, there was a discussion on social inclusiveness for preparedness, like in camps, in shelters, different forms of discrimination that people faces. So we need to consider the gender perspective and the cultural perspective in that, and it should be included in preparedness interventions only, so that people can actually reach out to you during preparedness or during response. These were the 2 points that were added.
Thanks a lot, Shivangi, for adding that. Appreciate it. Thank you, Shivani and Shivangi, both for concisely presenting the discussions from Group 5. I would now like to invite Dr. Henna to summarize the points for Group 5.
Yeah, Ice, if you can please screen share the topic that was allotted to us. It was on integration of preparedness interventions in existing policies and framework. Now, the question itself, I mean, we had a lot of doubts and we obviously don't have any quick fix solutions. But as Sarabjit sir has pointed out in his presentation that India has clear-cut policies on disaster management with the Disaster Management Act 2005, clearly laying out some national, state, and district level guidelines. And we've left it a lot to the discretion of the local governments, and they're quite empowered in devising their own preparedness and response efforts. There was a lot of discussion on what should be the best practices on preparedness and what is actually the definition of how, what is the best practice that is being adopted. We talked a lot about Odisha, we talked about Tamil Nadu, with the government proactively engaging in preparedness actions, but what makes a practice best is something that a lot of our group members discussed. We discussed a lot of challenges, basically integration, keeping it aside. We discussed about Cyclone Amphan and some of the issues around the twin disasters with the state not being prepared, and so many issues of inclusivity and issues of pregnant women. Situation was unpredictable, no ambulances, no micro planning, and we needed to ensure respectful deliveries for pregnant women and neonatal children, so there were issues around that. With the drought affected locations and cattle camps, usually we see that for larger animals we do have cattle camp. What happens to smaller animals? So we were talking about some of these, grappling with some of the challenges that have happened over the past post-pandemic, and the greater and a growing need for developing a comprehensive multi-stakeholder preparedness action plan and how that can be devised. Some innovative solutions were discussed also. So issues around accessibility were also discussed, like accessibility issues in both Assam and Bihar and Amphan floods, keeping in view the twin disasters that have happened, and where many CSOs were also abstained from actually, and there were some restrictions imposed on whether CSOs should be, there were some quarantine systems which are applying for some CSOs on whether they should respond to the crisis or they should not. So while we talk about integration, we actually talk about the implementation and the response efforts that are falling under the ambit on the post pandemic thing. So in the context of COVID also, we talked about when these twin disasters happen, how prepared are we, like floods, Amphan, and so many. Did we have any existing guidelines? The right to life with dignity, the seriousness, all the minimum standards seriously jeopardized, how to devise strategies to formulate preparedness plans in this context. Sorry, I'm not going by the script. I'm going by some of the discussion that happened, which came out with some illustrious examples also. So we talked about the recent FCRA norms that are being set out and what it means to the civil society, and how do we collaborate now openly, CSOs, CBOs, keeping in view the stringent formative actions in the pretext of the disasters that we are now, how to strengthen that, and how we can get into advocacy, and what are the policy reformations that need to go to kind of have a smooth implementation of the response efforts happening in the field. We also talked about one very important question on, are we really working on resilience building? Resilience is a very large term, and we then talked about contingency planning. Tapanda very rightly has put it that contingency planning is a part of resilience building, but resilience building is a very gradual and systematic approach. So at the community level, it has to seep in, the resilience factor, but we can start small, and at the local agency level, at the local community level, we have to take some baby steps towards achieving that resilience, whatever that means. So we have had some plans on how we can formulate this contingency plans in terms of setting out norms, standards for early preparedness actions, which can be a part of our advocacy initiatives in the current framework of action. And Tapanda has suggested that we now is the time for developing, strengthening, devising some checklist, standards, protocols for every hazard and every response plan that is done in the aftermath of every hazard. For example, we're talking about setting toilets. What are the minimum standards that need to be adopted? We're talking about hygiene promotion. So what are the multi-hazard? What are the minimum standards? What priorities need to be in place? How well integrated are these with the existing how we customize them, how we contextualize them. We did talk about a whole lot of state examples with state contexts also. We would not go into this is largely what was discussed in our group. And we talked about Cyclone Nivar, and the center was prepared with COVID-19 and brought many restrictions and relief measures which could not reach at the right time. So these are some of the challenges we discussed and how we address them. And then in the context of these challenges, how we devise some procedures and strategies on how these can be addressed. I would request ICE to please add in if I've missed out on some very important point which was included. Otherwise, largely, these are the basic discussion points which we have had.
Thank you very much, Dr. Henna. I think you have managed to comprehensively cover everything. And after listening to all the discussions that took place in each group, the summaries, I think we've really beautifully set the context for the next session that is awaiting us, which is on strategic planning and way forward, because a lot of common themes have also come out from each breakaway session. So if we start from assessments, we see that right from assessments to the final phase of policy integration, there is a definite need of coordination between all levels, local levels, the governments, government agencies, NGOs, local organizations, international organizations alike. So we see that coordination is something that is called for across all 5 of the discussions that took place today. Assessments call for a joint assessment and also for group discussions during assessments, for the inclusion of community, for a kind of a feedback mechanism to be designed and things like that. So we've seen that coordination is a common and a recurring theme which definitely needs to play into our way forward that we will discuss in the next half of the session. Apart from that, the other themes that we've seen is also of capacity building, which is again across all 5 sections. We've seen that how capacity building and the importance of training volunteers is extremely important, and it is also very vital to set up this pool fund mechanism right from a local level, so that there is that so that capacity can be built and the existing capacity can be strengthened. So there was also points discussing that there should be leveraging of local the kind of resources that are available at the local communities, and this is a theme that is discussed in a recurring fashion in DRR and disaster management. Then another point that came up was for SOPs and to have very clearly defined roles and responsibilities while responding or while preparing to respond to any disaster, that these SOPs should be extremely clear so as to avoid any kind of duplication of efforts and a waste of effort in a way. Apart from that, we've seen that how resilience and response planning should also be integrated into the policies, and we've seen the kind of loopholes or the kind of gaps that exist in the current policies and how that needs to be worked on and to be made more inclusive. Inclusivity is also a theme that has come up, that how right from the assessment phase to integration of policy, we need to ensure that vulnerable groups are, that there are special provisions made for vulnerable groups, and that the assessments, integrate these vulnerable groups who are not otherwise usually accessible or falling within the ambit of safety mechanisms or safety nets in the society. So right from the phase of assessment down to preparing capacity building, preparation, early warning systems, and to integration of policy, these vulnerable groups must be included at every phase. Apart from that, the early warning system and preparedness for early warning systems, we've talked about risk communication and community engagement to dispel rumors and any kind of misinformation that might spread. We've also talked about how this should be done and could be done at a very initial stage in life by integrating it into schools and that kind of education. So I think that the kind of discussions we've had today have been extremely fruitful and have brought out a lot of aspects that we often we understand the importance of, and we need to sort of integrate in our way forward in our strategic planning. So I think without since we've listened to in detail to what each group has said, I think we are ready to now move to the next part of the session, which is strategic planning and way forward. And I would like to invite Ms. Chandni Chog from Doctors for You at this stage to talk about the kind of response to, or the kind of preparedness for cyclones that has been done in the state of Odisha. Chandni from Doctors for You. If I'm audible, I request you to kindly unmute. Yeah.
Hi everyone. So firstly, I would thank Sphere to give us this opportunity. And I'm a doctor and a public health specialist. So on our response to Odisha flood or Odisha cyclone, I think in all the presentations above, it has already been discussed. So what the, Doctors for You did was, so we majorly have 4 teams. And the first response is that we link as soon as there's any disaster, so we link to the DM of the state and in collaboration with the DM, because it becomes very easy for the NGO and our team to work in that area. So the first team, the first response of the first team is that we go for the vulnerability assessment of that area, so that we can partner with the local government there and local NGOs, and we have set partners with the stakeholders there. So we can the assessment of the logistics and resources are done. Then the immediate response from the second team goes is like we have a set of doctors and nurses which we send to the area, so that they have the technical expertise to, because mainly the major response in any of the cyclone is that the population, they are affected. So the doctors and teams, and we make a makeshift hospital is made there.
Ms. Chandni, we are unable to hear you. Although you are not on mute, I think you might be having some technical issues at this point. Chandni, can you hear me? Chandni, am I audible to you?
Hello.
Yes, I can hear you now.
I'm sorry, there was some technical error. I think the network was lost.
No problem, no problem. Please, we heard until the production of a makeshift hospital, but after that, I'm afraid we lost you. I'll have to request you to please repeat from where we last heard you.
Sure. So DFI in response, what we have a special warehouse where we have two boats. So during any of the flood or cyclone, the first thing is that the floods, they evacuate the people affected in that area and they are shifted to a safer area. So that is the first response. Then the second team has doctors and nurses, and we have a team of volunteers who visit the place, and we do have makeshift hospitals made there. So we can easily check for the diseases caused during the evacuation process or any other diseases. They are, they are checked for it. Then in the last stage, what we do is, so it is mainly rehabilitation, so that even after the disaster, the first response has been given to the disaster, to have a longer term effect, it carries on. Like when DFI responded in Kashmir, so we were asked we were there for another 3 years to carry on the process, so that whatever has been lost and for proper long term effect was there. So rehabilitation is done by the fourth team. So I think for emergency preparedness, mainly this is the kind of response, and the trainings are being organized on a regular basis. So all our doctors and the team of volunteers, they're always ready to immediately respond.
Chandni, am I audible to you? Chandni, can you hear me? Okay, it seems that she is facing some difficulties in connecting her audio perhaps, or is facing some network issues. But we could try and wait if she's able to come back. Chandni, am I audible to you now?
Hello.
Yes, you're audible.
Sorry.
No worries. Please continue. Go on.
So this is the response from the doctors for you that we have done in the past cyclones and floods.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks a lot for sharing the very comprehensive and kind of very systematic approach followed by doctors for you in the past to combat the kind of devastation that occurs during these disasters. And we really appreciated the kind of experiences that you've shared with us, and the kind of step-by-step procedure and process that you follow at Doctors for You, and how it is a very methodological approach to the disasters. And what I think is very appreciable is how the on-site sort of makeshift hospitals are formed, and very kind of like a rapid kind of action is taken. Without it, I mean, while despite it being rapid, it is still very, very systematic. So I thank you for sharing that. And we appreciate the efforts taken by Doctors for You. It's definitely a very good learning for all the organizations present here. And we're grateful to you for sharing it. Now, unfortunately, our next speaker is meant to be Mr. Sarabjit Singh Sahota to talk about planning at the organizational level, but I'm afraid he's had to step out of the meeting. So I would now like to invite Mr. Tapan Mohapatra from ECHO to discuss, to talk about the summary of the planning before we move into the joint action plan. Mr. Tapan, are you able to hear me?
Yes, thank you very much. Thanks, everyone. Yeah, it was great pleasure to be part of this wonderful exercise. It's a lot of good things came out in the beginning. In the beginning, we got some global good case presentations of good practices, and then we tried to filter it down through looking it into Indian context. And it's really nice to see many of the good things are coming up now. Many groups talked about the accountability of affected population, which we were doing it, but it was unconsciously. Now it seems that it's coming in limelight. It's a primary objective for any humanitarian actions or any response agencies. But it's really good. Then again, the assessment group come out with more and more focus on the digitalization process, which we have started it, but so we have many more miles to go. I'm sure this group will look into that. In that group particularly, I would speak, yes, you talked about more on this assessment strategy. Probably we need to little bit more work more on this defining the assessment strategy, with rapid, intermediate, and multi-sector detailed assessment with access, no access issues. Again, in the COVID context, it's not always access due to the damage or things. Also, some other factors like in COVID, we didn't have any access. So those different strategies in different scenario, how we are going to approach it, we need to define it now so that we, in the right time, we can really implement it. I really appreciate the second group came out with the developing SOP response plan for the response, and particularly in the COVID context. New normals, new norms, it will not be overnight, it will not be relaxed. I think coming years we have to follow these new norms and protocols. So all our mechanisms and systems, what we have, we really need to think adapting those new protocols. And again, particularly for the frontline workers, the SOPs to be strictly followed, particularly in the context of COVID. It's came out that's now it is a high time to think about what's globally people are talking about the localization. Think about more and more focus on the digitalization and a little on the in-kind response. We really need to use the local resources, localization process to really give the momentum of the localization process, which you are talking for many days, many years now. But now it has become the right time to think about using the local resources, local systems. So probably that's need some sorts of change in our current approach. We need to think about more on decentralizing our response mechanisms at the organizations level. Then really that's the next group came out, the coordination with the military. Yeah, civil-military coordination is a really key factor, particularly in the Indian context when this NDRF and SDRF are put forward, and they do excellent job. We salute to them. But humanitarian agencies often stay back in that early stage. We really need to work hand in hand. So this is not possible at the field level for our local partners cannot go and directly do that one. Probably at the national level, Spare India, IAG need to think about developing the strategy. How do we really improve the coordination, civil military coordination? So this is also need to be mechanism as well as capacity building of all frontline workers and local agencies is also a new area to think about more on improving the total mechanisms what we have currently in that. Lastly, I talked about the digitalization. So it's not only for the assessment; it's for all over. And minimum, if you able to do it, one assessment or one sorts of survey, taking into different sectors. Do it once. Don't do for different sectors. Often we see our agencies does PDM, endline. 3, 4 having the same could have been combined together. Do it one. Think about more and more on contactless response mechanisms, whenever is possible, and use of local markets if it's functional. So these are the new areas probably we can think and really we improve what we have planned it now and make it further. So we expect this new draft will come. Probably it would be good if we share it once again before finalizing and then finalize it. That's all from my side. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Tapan, for kind of summarizing the discussion that we've had today, as well as really pinpointing what exactly we need to revisit and relook at and reinvent, and also giving out some kind of direction and way forward when it comes to digitization of the process or the assessment strategies, and as well as decentralizing mechanisms across all the kind of thematic areas of response. So I thank you for summarizing the planning. And I would now like to invite Ms. Divya Gupta, who is the manager of the IAC team, IAC vertical of Sphere India, to kindly come and summarize today's, after the summary, provide the joint action plan and move into the kind of way forward that we should take with us after this meeting. Divya, over to you, please.
Thank you, Ais, and thank you, Tapanda, for covering major points related to way forward and joint action. So let me share, I will not repeat the points which already shared by Tapanda, and let me share the rest. There are other disasters like heat wave and flood preparedness meeting scheduled in this coming days. We have heat wave meeting on 24th and flood preparedness meeting on 25th. These meetings will be followed by respective simulation exercises with multi-stakeholders in month of April. And based on these breakaway sessions, which we did today and will be done in other 2 meetings, these 3 meetings, Sphere will write to all the members of each group and engage them with after the meeting. The mini sessions will call out the primary inputs and suggestions, which will later feed into a detailed document based on the expertise of each group member. And these simulation exercises on multi-hazard preparedness are to reduce vulnerability to disaster risk and other catastrophe commonly faced by communities in our country, and increase the capacity of state and entities to effectively plan for and respond to the disasters. With this objective to generate awareness on disaster simulation with respect to the hazards to deliberate base and action required to reduce the frequency and focus on recovery, and advocate for case-specific simulation exercises and activities to enhance community engagement and learning, which will help all of us in better direction on multi-disaster preparedness and improve knowledge and capacity of community on SOP during the emergencies. So these are the points which I wanted to add with the Tapanda's pointers. If I miss any important point, I request my all colleagues who are present here to please add. Thank you, Ais. Thank you so much. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Divya, for indicating the kind of joint action plan that we formed today and also about the sessions that are to follow. I think that two extremely pertinent issues along with the discussions that we've had on Cyclone today, and we do hope to see the participation of our members who are here today. With this, we come to the close of our session, and I would like to thank all our participants today. First and foremost, I would like to thank Mr. Ranjan Bagh from Caritas India for wonderfully moderating this session and being an extremely robust and important part of the preparation and the planning of this session as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Ranjan. I would like to thank our global expert who joined, Mr. Raymond Etienne Zing from the IFRC Asia Pacific Regional Office, for sharing his reflections and his experiences with anticipatory action and impact reduction of early actions. I also thank Mr. Ahmad Ul Haq, who is the director of the CPP from the government of Bangladesh. We greatly appreciated the learnings that you brought to us from Bangladesh, and we truly have a lot to learn and integrate within our own plans as well. We thank Mr. Harun Al Rashid, who is a founding member of the CPP. He was unfortunately able to join for this session. However, he was rather enthusiastic to be a part of it, and it is regretful that he was unable to join, but we do thank him nevertheless. We thank Mr. Sarabjit Singh Sahuta from UNICEF for speaking about the integration of cyclone preparedness in government policies. And we thank all our wonderful participants who made the discussions of the group work and the breakaway sessions extremely enriching and extremely versatile and valuable in planning our way forward and sort of identifying the challenges that currently exist. I thank Ms. Chandni Chugh from Doctors for You for presenting the wonderfully systematic and methodological way followed by Doctors for You. It was truly inspiring for the other organizations to listen to that. And I thank Mr. Tapan Mohapatra from ECHO for again being a part of the planning of this session, as well as summarizing the key discussion points and the key way forward for cyclone preparedness and action. And lastly, I would like to thank all our Sphere team members for putting in all the hard work and ensuring such a great session. We received a lot of active participation today, which is truly, truly appreciable. And with this, I would like to close today's meeting, unless Dr. Henna would like to add anything or say a vote of thanks.
Thank you so much. And thanks to you. A very big round of applause to you and appreciation to you for coordinating on the back end also and presenting the meeting so well. So I just want to put in a few points. As Divya has pointed out, that we've come out with a breakaway session. Now, all our SPARE members, we were joined by 18 to 20 of our SPARE members today in this first round of and the first series of cyclone preparedness. We're going to have 2 more in this week. But the idea is that the breakaway sessions talk about, after giving some surmise and setting some ground on the best practices that are available, not only in India, but globally as well, we should come out with creating some mini working groups. So all these 5 group sessions that happened today, which had the participation and representation from all our SPARE members who have technical expertise in different fields. So we wish to engage with them in the forthcoming weeks in drafting a set of some chapters, some 5 chapters. For example, we talk about today cyclone preparedness, and we can do that in the course of the next 1 month or so, which can then feed into a joint action plan for cyclone preparedness for India. I know this is going to be a very ambitious agenda, but in a 2-hour meeting, we cannot expect to explore and cover all the aspects which can come under cyclone preparedness. We are very apologetic that we were not joined by OSTMA. We were supposed to be joined by the Executive Director, OSTMA. Now, Odisha State Disaster Management Authority has also come out with their own robust mechanisms on cyclone preparedness, which could also feed into our actions also. So our endeavor was to have global, national, local, and volunteers and networks who are actually implementing these preparedness actions at the field, to have them in one platform and to have everybody's perspective, to be able to collate it and then document it and then come out with some guidelines which we can then, as Divya has pointed out, use in our simulation exercise somewhere in April. Now that is the WhatsApp groups of these technical groups that are formulating after we've done these 3 rounds of preparedness meetings, to see how we can develop these mini chapters on this, which we can then take up with relevant government authorities to get it vetted, endorsed, or maybe then we'll be able to roll out such exercises. So Tapanda and Anjan, you want to add something to what I've said? If you're still in the meeting, before we close this meeting, and we would also want to have any submissions, any insights, any inputs from any of the other participants who have joined us and been with us over the course of these last 2 hours. Tapanda and Anjan.
No, I think that's fine from my side. I think, yes, we hope by in 1 month this group will, whoever is in the group will have that, and we might add few more. Then we have an internal group to finalize it.
Hina, Mahendraji would like to tell, please unmute him.
Yeah.
Yes, Mahendraji, I've given you permission to
No, I was just was listening to the last speak, Lies, if I pronounce it properly, Lai. See, there are already formats available that is given by NDMA and NIDM. And in case it is the state has a major responsibility, and the state takes the necessary action right from the ground up to the state level to the national level. And states go by their own formats. It is not be appropriate for us to develop some formats and asking the state to do it, and it will be rejected outrightly. Because the formats and templates go by as per the Government of India norms. In every action, right from including the preparedness, the relief, evacuation, response, recovery, everything for the state will go by their own templates. I wouldn't understand in case if you're trying to develop formats and asking to intervene. Instead of that, it will be better for the groups to accept the templates which the states are given, orient our civil society groups to adapt those formats so that the information gets fed into the system, which is not possible now because what information we collect does not correspond to the formats that the state practices. So I think we need to deliberate on that and look at how do we proceed on that. Over.
Thank you so much, Mahendraji. This is well noted. But all this discourse that happened over the course of this last 2 hours, I mean, we've come out with the CPP model and approach, and how important it is for multiple stakeholders to be engaged and involved in a preparedness action. So I completely agree with you when you say there are existing templates and we need to orient the CSO, CBOs in terms of how they can also be engaged and with having a more participatory approach to that. So that should be our endeavor, and that towards that we will make some efforts. And but then also to advocate wherever we have these templates which are not maybe after the pandemic. We've also had discussions during the breakaways that there were many challenges in terms of implementing them with these twin disasters, and how prepared are we with the existing tools. Do they require any modifications? So there has to be some exercise which can happen at the state level to have more discussions around that and consultations around that, which we'll discuss in the course of time. But certainly your suggestions are very well noted, and we will go by your advice and suggestions. Thank you so much, sir. Ice, we can close this with a vote of, I think, the final round, if there are any administrative directions.
Sure. Thank you, Dr. Henna. So we have received a request from some participants to share the report or the MOMs of this meeting, and we'll be doing that. But apart from that, I do not have any administrative announcements, and I just thank everybody who has been on the panel today, as well as a participant in today's session. It has been a greatly valuable session. And with this, I would like to close today's meeting. Goodbye.